The rust-colored sun cast long shadows across the abandoned spaceport. Sand particles swirled in the dry wind, scratching against metal surfaces with an eerie whisper. Among the skeletal frames of forgotten vessels, one ship stood apart, its hull surprisingly intact, despite decades of neglect. The Passage Checks. Once the crown jewel of the Hicks family fleet, had remained dormant for 117 years, its secrets locked away from prying eyes and grasping hands. Mara Hendris adjusted her goggles as another gust of sand swept across the landing pad. Her weathered mechanic's jumpsuit, patched in a dozen places, bore the stains of countless repair jobs across the frontier worlds. The tools, hanging from her belt, clinked softly as she approached the ship, each step deliberate and reverent. "Didn't think I'd ever find you," she whispered, reaching out to touch the hull. Beneath her fingertips, the metal felt unexpectedly warm, as though some essence of life still pulsed within. Despite the century of abandonment, the ship's elegant lines remained visible beneath the dust and corrosion, a testament to craftsmanship from an era when vessels were built to outlast their creators. Mara pulled a small cylinder from her pocket, turning it over in her calloused hands. The family data cylinder contained the biometric keys that, if her grandmother's stories were true, would awaken the dormant systems of the Passage Checks. More importantly, it would give her access to what lay hidden in the cargo hold. Project Lazarus, the technology that had forced her ancestors to abandon the ship and scatter across the frontier worlds. The year was 2415, and the outer reaches of the galaxy had become a refuge for those seeking to escape the ever-expanding control of the Galactic Consortium. Out here, among the frontier planets, people could still carve out lives beyond the watchful eyes of corporate regulation. But even in these distant sectors, Consortium influence was growing, their security forces increasingly present on planets that had once been havens for independent traders and mechanics like Mara. She'd spent years gathering information, piecing together the fragmented stories passed down through generations of Hendris women. The Passage Checks had been her great-great-grandmother's ship, commissioned by the Hicks family during the early colonial expansion. Then came Project Lazarus, a technological breakthrough that promised to change humanity's future, until the consortium declared it forbidden technology and hunted down everyone associated with its development. The ship had been abandoned here, on this nameless desert planet, while her ancestors scattered with fragments of research data, vowing to reunite when the time was right. That time, Mara believed, had finally come. A metallic groan echoed across the spaceport as the wind shifted direction. Mara looked over her shoulder, confirming she was still alone. The broker who'd sold her the landing coordinates had warned her that scavengers frequented the area, stripping abandoned vessels for parts. The fact that the Passage Checks remained largely intact was nothing short of miraculous. She ran her hand along the ship's access panel, wiping away decades of accumulated dust. Beneath it, the Hicks family crest remained visible, a stylized hourglass surrounded by stars, symbolizing humanity's quest to conquer time itself. Appropriate, given what Project Lazarus promised. "Time to wake up, old girl," Mara murmured, pressing her palm against the scanner. Nothing happened. She frowned, examining the panel more closely. The power cells would have died long ago. Of course, reaching into her pack, she pulled out a portable generator and a set of adapter cables, searching for the emergency power input her grandmother had described in her journals. It took nearly an hour of careful probing before she located the hidden port, concealed beneath a false panel near the landing strut. As she connected the cables, a faint vibration ran through the ship's hull, like a sleeping giant stirring after a long hibernation. Lights flickered weakly along the ship's exterior, struggling to illuminate after over a century of darkness. The access panel hummed to life, its screen displaying a faded Hicks logo before requesting authentication. This was the moment Mara had prepared for all her life. Her fingers trembled slightly as she inserted the family data cylinder into the waiting slot. A soft blue light washed over her face as the scanner activated, reading not just the cylinder's data, but also performing a DNA analysis on the person presenting it. "Identity verification required," announced a synthetic voice, startling Mara with its clarity despite the years of disuse. "Please state your name and lineage." Mara cleared her throat. "Mara Hendris, descendant of Alara Hrix Hendris, rightful heir to the passage checks." Seconds stretched into an eternity as the system processed her claim. Then, with a series of mechanical clicks, the main hatch began to unseal, venting stale air that carried the faint metallic scent of preserved electronics and the lingering echo of a time long past. "Welcome aboard, Air Hendris." The ship's AI greeted her. "It has been 117 years, 42 days, and 19 hours since last system access. Multiple critical systems require attention. Project Lazarus remains secure." Mara released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She'd done it. Found the ship, accessed its systems. Now came the real challenge, getting it operational before anyone discovered what she was doing. Because if the stories were true, Project Lazarus would draw the attention of not just the consortium, but everyone who hungered for the power to control humanity's future. As she stepped inside the ship, the hatch sealed behind her with a decisive click. The journey her ancestors had begun over a century ago was now hers to complete. "No turning back now," she whispered to herself, activating her flashlight to illuminate the ship's darkened interior. "Let's see what secrets you've been keeping all these years." The passageway before her seemed to swallow the beam of her light, inviting her deeper into the heart of the passage checks, and closer to the legacy that had shaped her family's destiny for generations. The dockmaster's office was little more than a rusted shipping container perched on stilts above the decaying landing pads. Mara climbed the metal staircase, each step creaking ominously beneath her weight. Through the grime-covered window, she could see the silhouette of the broker, a hunched figure illuminated by the glow of outdated monitoring equipment. "You're late," the broker called out as she entered, not bothering to look up from his screens. Rashan Vakto was exactly the type of middleman who thrived in the frontier worlds. Opportunistic, untrustworthy, but connected to all the right information networks. His cybernetic eye whirred softly as it adjusted, scanning Mara from head to toe. "Thought maybe you'd changed your mind, or gotten yourself killed." "The coordinates were off by 3 kilometers, Mara replied coolly, leaning against the doorframe. "Almost walked into a scavenger camp." Rashan grunted, finally turning to face her. "Still alive, though. Found what you were looking for?" "Maybe." Mara didn't trust him enough to confirm her discovery. "I need startup clearance for an unclaimed vessel. Nothing official, just enough to bypass the automated security alerts." The broker's expression shifted from boredom to calculated interest. "Unclaimed vessel, huh? That heap of metal out there is registered as derelict. Taking off in it would trigger every security algorithm in the sector. That's why I'm here. I know you can generate temporary clearance codes." Rashan's cybernetic eye glowed brighter as he leaned forward. "Those don't come cheap, and they don't last long. Consortium security has gotten smarter about catching fakes." "I can pay," Mara said, reaching into her pocket and producing a small pouch. The crystalline shards inside caught the light, glittering with an iridescent blue hue that immediately captured the broker's attention. "Quantum crystals," he murmured, his organic eye widening. "Genuine ones, not the synthetic garbage floating around these days. Where'd you get these?" "Does it matter?" Mara pushed the pouch across the table. "I need 48 hours of clearance, long enough to get that ship beyond consortium patrol routes." Rashan hesitated, his fingers hovering over the pouch. "What's on that ship that's worth quantum crystals? Must be something special to justify this kind of payment." "Family heirloom," Mara replied evenly. "Nothing that concerns you." Everything that happens in my port concerns me. The broker picked up one crystal, examining it closely, especially when it might bring consortium attention. I've worked hard to keep this operation off their radar. Mara leaned forward, lowering her voice. The ship was my great-great-grandmother's. The registration expired decades ago, but the consortium has no claim on it. I just want what belongs to my family. Noble sentiment, Rashan said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. But you'll need more than clearance codes. That ship hasn't moved in over a century. The moment its engines fire up, every sensor in the system will register the anomaly. I'll worry about that. Just get me the codes. The broker pocketed the crystals with practiced swiftness. It'll take a few hours, and I'll need access to your ship's registration transponder to properly calibrate the codes. No access, Mara stated firmly. Just give me the base code sequence. I'll handle the implementation. That's not how this works. It's exactly how this works. She placed another, smaller crystal on the table. This one's worth twice the others combined. Take it and give me what I need, or I find another broker who doesn't ask so many questions. Rashan's jaw tightened, but the allure of the crystal proved too strong. Fine. Your funeral if it doesn't integrate properly. He turned to his terminal, fingers flying across the worn interface. Come back in 3 hours. And Hendris, whatever you're really after, I hope it's worth the risk. Mara didn't respond. She knew better than most that some risks were necessary, especially when they involved technology that could reshape humanity's future. As she left the broker's office, she caught sight of a consortium patrol ship passing overhead, its sleek hull reflecting the desert sun. Time was running short. Once she activated the main systems of the passage checks, the countdown would begin. She needed to be ready. 3 hours later, code sequence in hand, Mara returned to the abandoned ship. The desert winds had picked up, driving sand against the hull in rhythmic patterns that sounded almost like whispered warnings. She ignored them, focusing instead on the task ahead. The ship's emergency power had maintained the minimal systems she'd activated earlier. The main hatch recognized her approach, opening with a hydraulic hiss that seemed unnaturally loud in the empty spaceport. Once inside, she made her way directly to the bridge, guided by the ship's AI, which had gradually restored interior lighting along her path. Main system access required, the AI informed her, as she settled into the captain's chair. Current power levels insufficient for full reactivation sequence. I know, Mara replied, connecting her portable power cells to the ship's energy distribution network. Let's start with navigation and propulsion. Life support at minimal levels. She inserted the data cylinder into the command console, simultaneously entering the clearance codes Roshan had provided. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the bridge erupted into activity, screens flickering to life, displaying system diagnostics and status reports that scrolled too quickly for her to follow. Warning, the AI announced, its voice taking on a more urgent tone. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Mara's heart raced. What? Where? External scan initiated from Port Authority systems. Rashan. Of course he'd try to peek inside the ship's database. The broker had never intended to honor their deal. Not once he suspected the vessel might contain something valuable. Block it, Mara commanded, fingers flying across the console as she activated the ship's ancient, but still formidable security protocols. And prepare for emergency launch sequence. Emergency launch inadvisable, the AI responded. Hull integrity at 78%. Navigation systems require calibration. Fuel cells at 62% capacity. We don't have a choice, Mara muttered, overriding the safety protocols. The ship shuddered as dormant systems awakened, power surging through conduits that hadn't carried energy in over a century. Warning indicators flashed across the console, but Mara ignored them, focusing instead on completing the startup sequence. Outside, an alarm began to wail. Rashan, no doubt, alerting security to her theft of the supposedly abandoned vessel. She had minutes, perhaps less, before consortium forces arrived. AI, designate me as acting captain, Mara commanded. Authorization Hendris Rick's lineage confirmation. Designation accepted. The AI confirmed. All systems now under your command. Captain Hendris. However, I must inform you that Project Lazarus protocols require separate authorization. One thing at a time, Mara replied, engaging the ship's thrusters. The passage checks groaned in protest, a century of inactivity making its components resistant to sudden movement. Just get us off this rock. The ship rose unsteadily, sand cascading from its hull as it broke free from the ground that had cradled it for so long. Through the viewport, Mara caught sight of figures running toward the landing pad, Rashan, and what appeared to be local security forces, their weapons already drawn. Incoming communication, the AI announced. Ignore it, Mara ordered, increasing power to the thrusters. The ship climbed higher, its movements becoming smoother as ancient systems remembered their purpose. Set course for the outer atmosphere. Prepare for hyperspace jump once we clear the gravity well. Hyperspace capabilities unverified, the AI warned. Recommend system diagnostic before... No time, Mara cut in, watching as a security vessel rose from the spaceport, clearly intending to intercept them. We jump as soon as possible. That's an order. The desert planet fell away beneath them, the curved horizon giving way to the star-speckled blackness of space. For a moment, Mara allowed herself to feel a flicker of triumph, after generations of waiting. The passage checks was finally returning to the stars, carrying its precious cargo toward a future her ancestors had only dreamed of. Then the proximity alarm screamed to life. Multiple vessels approaching, the AI reported. Identification markers indicate Consortium Security Division. They are transmitting demands for immediate surrender. Mara's mouth went dry. Not local security, actual Consortium forces. How had they responded so quickly, unless... They were already watching the ship, she realized aloud. All this time. Correct, the AI confirmed. Consortium monitoring of this vessel has been active for approximately 94 years, though surveillance intensity has varied. Mara swore under her breath. The stories her grandmother had told her suddenly made more sense. The Consortium hadn't simply outlawed Project Lazarus and then forgotten about it. They'd been patiently watching, waiting for someone from the Rick's lineage to return for the ship. And she'd walked right into their trap. Options, she demanded, watching as the Consortium vessels moved to surround the passage checks. Limited. The AI responded with what Mara could have sworn was a hint of regret. This vessel's defensive capabilities are currently offline. Hyperspace jump requires 16 more minutes of system preparation. 16 minutes they didn't have. Mara's mind raced. Considering and discarding possibilities, there had to be a way out, something her ancestors had planned for this very scenario. AI, she said suddenly. Access Project Lazarus protocols. Authorization code, Alara's legacy. Timekeeper Ascendant. The words had been passed down through generations, memorized by each Hendris daughter, but never explained. Mara had no idea what they would unlock, only that they were meant for a moment of desperate need. The bridge lights dimmed momentarily, then shifted to a deep blue hue. When the AI spoke again, its voice had changed, becoming richer, almost human. Project Lazarus protocols activated, it announced. Emergency contingency systems online. Greetings, Mara Hendris. I am Alara, the enhanced logical autonomous response algorithm, modeled after your ancestor. I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Mara stared at the console in shock. You're based on my great-great-grandmother? A neural imprint taken before the ship was abandoned, Alara confirmed. Limited but functional. More importantly, I have access to systems the Consortium doesn't know exist. On the view screen, the consortium vessels were moving into formation for a forced boarding action. Their weapons remained powered down. They wanted the ship intact. "Then get us out of here," Mara urged. "Preparing alternative escape protocol," Alara replied. "But you should know, Mara, once initiated, there's no going back. The path forward will change you, just as it changed your ancestors." Outside, a tractor beam lanced out from the lead consortium vessel, its energy field beginning to envelop the passage checks. Mara gripped the console, her decision made. "Do it! Whatever it takes!" "Very well," Alara said, and the ship came fully alive around them. Hidden propulsion systems engaged, breaking the tractor beam's hold with a surge of power that sent the passage checks hurtling away from the consortium vessels. Weapon systems Mara hadn't known existed deployed from concealed compartments in the hull, targeting the pursuing ships with precision that spoke of technology far beyond standard frontier capabilities. "Head for the asteroid field," Alara instructed, as Mara took manual control of the ship. "I'll guide you through." As the passage checks accelerated toward the dense cluster of space rock that orbited the desert planet, Mara felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of rightness, of coming home. Whatever secrets the ship held, whatever Project Lazarus truly was, she knew with sudden certainty that her entire life had been leading to this moment. Behind them, the consortium vessels gave chase, their commanders surely realizing that the abandoned ship was far more than they had anticipated. But the passage checks, awakened from its long slumber, was already proving it had lost none of its extraordinary capabilities. "Welcome home, heir of Rix," Alara said softly as they plunged into the asteroid field, leaving their pursuers struggling to follow. "Now, let me show you what your family sacrificed everything to protect." Mara guided the passage checks through the asteroid field with increasing confidence, her hands finding a natural rhythm with the ship's controls. What had begun as a desperate escape was transforming into something that felt almost like a dance, the vessel responding to her commands with growing fluidity as its systems continued to reactivate. "You're a natural pilot," Alara observed, "just like your ancestor." "Grandmother always said I had Alara's hands," Mara replied, narrowing her eyes as she navigated between two massive asteroids with barely meters to spare. "Though I always thought she meant I was good at fixing things, not flying them." Both skills come from the same place, an intuitive understanding of how systems work together. The AI's voice carried an unmistakable note of pride. "The consortium vessels are falling behind. Their standardized navigation protocols aren't designed for this kind of maneuvering." Through the rear scanners, Mara could see the consortium ships maintaining a cautious distance from the asteroid field's edge. They weren't retreating, but they weren't reckless enough to follow her current trajectory either. "They're calling for reinforcements," Alara reported. "We have perhaps 40 minutes before additional vessels arrive. Then we need to be far away by then." Mara studied the navigation display. "Can we jump to hyperspace from inside the asteroid field?" "Inadvisable. But there's an alternative." A new route appeared on the display, leading deeper into the field, before curving around toward what appeared to be a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. "There's a maintenance facility hidden within that cluster, one of several outposts the Rix family established before the consortium crackdown." Mara raised an eyebrow. "A secret base inside an asteroid field? That's surprisingly dramatic for a family of scientists and engineers." "Your ancestors understood the value of theatricality when necessary," Alara replied, with what sounded remarkably like a chuckle. "The facility will allow us to fully restore the ship's systems and properly secure Project Lazarus before our next move." As they approached the asteroid cluster, Mara saw nothing that indicated a hidden facility, just the tumbling rocks that had protected the secret for over a century. Then, Alara transmitted a signal sequence, and a section of what appeared to be a solid asteroid face shimmered and disappeared, revealing a hangar entrance perfectly sized for the passage checks. Holographic camouflage, Mara breathed, impressed despite herself. That's old tech, but I've never seen it implemented so seamlessly. Your ancestors were nothing if not thorough. Alara guided the ship into the hangar, where automated systems immediately began connecting to the vessel's external ports. The facility has been in standby mode, maintained by autonomous drones. It recognized the ship's signature and is already preparing for our needs. As the hangar doors sealed behind them, Mara felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. They weren't safe, not truly, but they had bought valuable time. Now, she said, turning away from the controls. I think it's time you told me exactly what Project Lazarus is, and why the consortium has been hunting it for over a century. Of course. Alara's voice emanated from the bridge speakers, but also from a holographic projection that now formed in the center of the command deck, the image of a woman in her late 40s, with the same strong jawline and determined eyes that Mara saw whenever she looked in a mirror. But some things are better shown than told. Would you join me in the cargo hold, please? Mara followed the holographic figure through the ship's corridors, noting how the vessel seemed to be healing itself around them. Self-repair systems were gradually addressing the damage caused by decades of neglect, while environmental controls adjusted to create the perfect balance of temperature and humidity. The ship was designed to endure long periods of dormancy, Alara explained, noticing Mara's observations. Though I admit, 117 years was pushing the limits of even our most optimistic projections. The cargo hold doors parted as they approached, revealing a space much larger than Mara had expected. Rather than the empty chamber she had anticipated, the hold had been transformed into what appeared to be a laboratory, with equipment that somehow managed to look both ancient and futuristic simultaneously. At the center stood a transparent chamber, roughly the size and shape of a sleeping pod, but far more complex. Countless tubes and wires connected it to the surrounding equipment, pulsing with a soft blue light that matched the glow of the ship's engine core. This, Alara said quietly, is Project Lazarus, or rather, its physical manifestation. Mara approached the chamber slowly, her reflection distorted in its crystalline surface. It looks like a stasis pod. In the most basic sense. Yes, but it's so much more. Alara's hologram moved to stand beside her. Project Lazarus began as research into cellular regeneration, a means to heal injuries that would otherwise be fatal. But your great-great-grandmother discovered something unexpected. Under certain conditions, the process could do more than heal damaged tissue. It could reverse cellular degradation entirely. You're talking about reversing aging, Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Initially, yes, but the implications went further. Alara gestured, and the chamber's surface displayed a series of complex molecular structures. The Lazarus protocol doesn't simply reset cellular age. It preserves neural patterns while doing so. Memory, personality, consciousness, all maintained through the regeneration process. The truth dawned on Mara slowly, its implications unfolding in her mind like a flower opening to the sun. Immortality, she breathed. You created functional immortality. With limitations, Alara cautioned. The process is enormously resource-intensive. This chamber can sustain one person, and only one. The materials required for its construction are so rare that creating another would take decades, even with unlimited funding. Which is why the consortium wants it, Mara realized. Whoever controls this technology controls the future. One immortal leader, guiding humanity according to their vision, for generations. Precisely. Alara's expression grew solemn. When the consortium learned of Project Lazarus, they demanded it be surrendered for the greater good, which meant placement under their direct control. Your ancestor refused. She believed such power should never belong to a single entity, especially one driven by profit and control. Mara circled the chamber, studying its construction with a mechanic's eye. Despite its complexity, she could see the genius in its design, the elegant way its components worked together, the redundant systems that ensured its continued function even after a century of isolation. So she hid it, Mara said softly. Abandoned the ship somewhere they wouldn't think to look, and scattered the family to protect the secret, with the intention that someday, when the time was right, a descendant would return. Alara's hologram flickered slightly, an emotion that might have been hope crossing her digitized features. She believed humanity wasn't ready, that introducing functional immortality would cause more harm than good in a society already stratified by wealth and power. And now, Mara asked, turning to face the AI version of her ancestor, why is now the right time? Before Alara could answer, an alarm blared throughout the facility. On the nearest screen, security footage showed 3 sleek vessels approaching the asteroid field. But these weren't consortium ships. Their design was unlike anything Mara had seen before, with hull configurations that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light of the system's sun. Unknown vessels, Alara announced, her tone sharpening. Not consortium design or registration. Pirates? Mara suggested, already moving back toward the bridge. Negative. Their technology appears significantly advanced beyond current consortium standards. Alara's hologram kept pace with her. They're scanning the asteroid field with unusual precision. Conventional camouflage won't fool them for long. As Mara reached the bridge, the scanner showed the mysterious vessels deploying smaller craft, probe drones that began systematically searching the asteroid cluster, using scanning technology that easily penetrated the holographic camouflage. They know we're here, Mara realized. But who are they? And how did they find us so quickly? Unknown, Alara admitted. But their arrival changes our timeline. The maintenance cycle is only at 37% completion. Mara studied the tactical display, mind racing. Can we launch? Make a run for the system's edge? Possible, but risky. The passage checks requires at least 60% system functionality for a reliable hyperspace jump. Currently, we're at 48% and rising. One of the probes had reached their hiding place. Its sensors focused directly on the camouflaged hangar entrance. Within moments, the unknown vessels adjusted their course, heading straight for the facility. We're out of options, Mara decided. Prepare for emergency launch. We'll have to outrun them long enough for the systems to reach minimum hyperspace capability. As Alara initiated the launch sequence, the facility's external sensors captured a clear image of the lead vessel. Along its hull, barely visible against the dark metal, was a symbol Mara recognized from her grandmother's journals. A stylized eye, surrounded by 3 concentric circles. The Watchers, she breathed, cold dread settling in her stomach. They're real. You know of them? Alara asked, surprise evident in her voice. Grandmother's stories mentioned them. A shadow organization obsessed with acquiring advanced technology, operating beyond consortium control. Mara gripped the navigation controls as the hangar doors began to open. I always thought they were just tales to scare children away from dangerous tech. They are very real, Alara confirmed grimly. And if they're here, the situation is more dire than I calculated. The Watchers have been pursuing Project Lazarus since its inception. Their agents were responsible for the initial breach that forced your ancestor to hide the ship. The passage checks lifted off from the hangar floor, its engines humming with renewed power after the partial maintenance cycle. As they emerged from the asteroid, the 3 Watcher vessels immediately changed formation, moving to intercept. They're powering weapons, Alara reported. Capabilities unknown, but energy signatures suggest destructive potential beyond standard consortium armaments. They'd destroy the ship? Mara asked incredulously. I thought they wanted the technology. They want the data, not necessarily the implementation, Alara corrected her. And they're willing to tear this vessel apart to get it. The first energy blast struck before Mara could respond, hitting the passage check's rear shield with enough force to send the ship spinning. Warning lights flashed across the console as systems struggled to compensate. Shields at 62%, Alara announced. Direct hit to our propulsion systems would be catastrophic. Mara wrestled with the controls, bringing the ship back on course while evading a second blast. We need options. Alara. The AI was silent for a moment, an eternity in the midst of combat. When she spoke again, her voice had taken on a quality Mara hadn't heard before, resolution mixed with profound sadness. There is one option, Alara said, but it requires implementing the Lazarus Protocol under emergency conditions. The consequences are significant. What consequences? Mara demanded, banking the ship hard to avoid another energy blast. The protocol was designed for controlled implementation. Using it as an escape mechanism will require a complete power transfer from the ship's systems. The passage checks would need to self-destruct to generate the energy surge required. Mara's heart sank. Destroy the ship? After all this time trying to save it? The ship is merely a vessel, Alara replied gently. What matters is the knowledge it contains, and the heir who carries it forward. Another hit rocked the ship, this one breaching the outer hull in a non-critical section. Atmosphere vented briefly before emergency systems sealed the breach. Shields at 41%, Alara reported. Next direct hit will likely disable propulsion. Mara closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the ship vibrate beneath her hands, the legacy of generations, the culmination of her family's sacrifice and vision. To destroy it now seemed unthinkable. And yet, the protocol, she said finally. What exactly would it do? It would place you in a specialized stasis field, encoding the Project Lazarus data directly into your cellular structure. When the ship self-destructs, the energy release would propel your stasis pod beyond the Watcher's sensor range. Recovery beacons would activate once safe distance is achieved. And if I'm not recovered? Alara's hologram flickered. The stasis field would maintain your vital functions indefinitely, but without proper reactivation, you would remain suspended, potentially for centuries. An impossible choice, certain capture against potential eternal isolation. But as another blast struck the ship, causing systems throughout the vessel to fail, Mara realized it wasn't really a choice at all. Do it, she commanded. Activate the protocol. There's one more thing you should know, Alara said, her holographic hand reaching out as if to touch Mara's shoulder. Once the protocol is initiated, my program will be integrated with your neural patterns. I cannot exist independently once the ship is gone. Mara understood then. This wasn't just about saving Project Lazarus. It was about preserving the last remnant of her ancestor, the culmination of the Hryx legacy. I understand, she said softly. Thank you, Alara, for waiting, for trusting me. You are worthy of that trust, the AI replied. Now, quickly, to the Lazarus chamber. As Mara sprinted back to the cargo hold, the ship shuddered around her, systems failing in cascading sequence as the Watcher's attacks intensified. The Lazarus chamber was already open when she arrived, its interior pulsing with that same soft blue light. Remove all metal objects, Alara instructed, her hologram appearing beside the chamber. The process requires direct contact with your skin. Mara stripped off her tool belt, kicked away her boots, and removed the data cylinder from her pocket. As she placed it on a nearby console, she hesitated. The family legacy, all the data, will be encoded within you, Alara assured her. Nothing will be lost. Now, please, we have seconds, not minutes. Mara climbed into the chamber, lying back against its surprisingly warm surface. As the transparent cover sealed above her, she felt a moment of pure panic, the instinctive fear of being trapped, of surrendering control. Then, Alara's voice came to her, not through speakers but directly in her mind, as the neural interface activated. Don't fight it, Mara. Let the process flow through you. Remember why we do this, not for power, not for ourselves, but for the future of all humanity. A liquid that wasn't quite liquid began to fill the chamber, enveloping Mara in a cocoon of molecular processors that interfaced directly with her cellular structure. She gasped as the fluid entered her lungs, expecting to drown, but instead found herself breathing normally. Oxygen delivered directly to her bloodstream while the Lazarus medium did its work. Outside the chamber, she could see the ship's systems shutting down one by one, power being diverted to the final protocol. Alara's hologram stood watch, gradually becoming more transparent as her program transferred into the neural matrix being created within Mara's mind. The ship is setting its self-destruct sequence. Alara's voice explained within her thoughts. When it activates, the explosion will propel your stasis pod away from the Watchers while simultaneously masking your life signs. To them, it will appear that Project Lazarus was destroyed with the ship. Mara wanted to respond, to ask how long she would drift, to know what would happen when, if, she was recovered. But the Lazarus protocol was taking hold now, slowing her thoughts, her heartbeat, her very cellular processes. The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was Alara's hologram placing a hand against the chamber's surface, a gesture of connection across generations. The last thing she heard was a whispered promise. You will wake again, heir of Rix, and when you do, the future will be waiting. Then darkness claimed her, and the passage checks, faithful guardian of the Rix legacy for over a century, erupted in a final blaze of light and energy, casting its precious cargo into the void. Consciousness returned in fragments, sensations before thoughts, awareness before memory. First came the feeling of warmth, then the rhythmic sound of machinery, and finally the soft glow of light against closed eyelids. Mara opened her eyes to find herself in a medical bay, unlike any she had seen before. The technology surrounding her bed was sleek and unfamiliar, with holographic displays hovering in the air rather than confined to physical screens. Through a large viewport, she could see stars, not the chaotic scatter of normal space, but the elongated streaks of a vessel in faster-than-light travel. Ah, you're awake. A tall man with silver-streaked hair approached her bedside, his white medical coat bearing an insignia Mara didn't recognize, a stylized helix wrapped around what appeared to be a small planet. How do you feel? Mara tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her vocal cords stiff from disuse. The doctor, for surely that's what he was, offered her a small cup of water, supporting her head as she drank. Slowly, he cautioned. Your body has been in stasis for 8 standard hours. It takes time to readjust. 8 hours. Not the centuries she had feared. Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by caution. Who had found her? Where was she being taken? As if reading her thoughts, the doctor smiled reassuringly. You're aboard the Haven, Mara Hendris. We've been searching for your stasis pod since we detected the energy signature of the passage check's self-destruction. Who are you? She managed to ask, her voice raspy but functional. My name is Dr. Marcus Elias, he replied. I was a colleague of your ancestor, though I doubt the name appears in your family records. We worked together on the early stages of Project Lazarus, before the consortium intervention forced us to separate our research. Mara studied him with growing suspicion. You knew my great-great-grandmother? That's impossible. You'd be over 150 years old. Dr. Elias's smile widened slightly. 172, actually. It seems your ancestor wasn't the only one exploring the possibilities of cellular regeneration. Before Mara could process this revelation, The medical bay doors slid open to admit a woman whose bearing immediately commanded attention. Tall and statuesque, with dark skin and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they fell upon. She wore a uniform similar to Dr. Elias's coat, but with additional insignia that suggested a position of authority. "Director Voss," Dr. Elias greeted her with a respectful nod. "Our guest is awake." "So I see." Director Voss approached Mara's bedside, her expression carefully neutral. "Welcome aboard the Haven, Herr Hendris. You've led us on quite a chase." "Who are you people?" Mara demanded, struggling to sit up despite her body's protests. "What do you want with Project Lazarus?" "We are the Continuity Council," Director Voss replied calmly. "A group your ancestor helped establish before she was forced to hide the passage checks. And we don't want Project Lazarus. We want to ensure it's used as your family always intended." Mara's head swam with questions. But one voice cut through the confusion, Alara's, speaking directly into her mind, as it had in the final moments aboard the ship. "They speak the truth. Mara, the Continuity Council was part of your ancestors' contingency plan. Listen to what they have to offer. The data transfer was successful. Then, Dr. Elias observed, noticing something in Mara's expression. Alara's neural imprint has integrated with your consciousness. She's here, Mara confirmed, tapping her temple. In my mind, it's strange, but not unpleasant, like having a conversation with myself. Except the other self knows things I don't. The integration will stabilize over time, Dr. Elias assured her. Eventually, you'll be able to access Alara's knowledge seamlessly, without the distinct separation you feel now. Director Voss gestured toward the viewport. We're currently en route to Haven Outpost, our primary research facility. There, you'll meet the full council and learn exactly what your ancestors set in motion all those years ago. Mara's strength was returning rapidly, another effect of the Lazarus Protocol, she suspected. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, testing her balance before standing. "And if I don't want to go to your outpost?" she asked, caution still overriding curiosity. "If I want to take Project Lazarus and continue my family's work independently?" "Then we would provide you with a vessel and supplies," Director Voss replied without hesitation. "The choice has always been yours, Herr Hendris. That was the covenant your ancestor established with the Council, that no descendant would ever be coerced or manipulated into a path they didn't choose freely." "She speaks truth," Alara confirmed in Mara's mind. "The Council exists to support the Hryx vision, not dictate it." Somewhat reassured, Mara nodded slowly. "I'll hear what the Council has to say, but I make no promises beyond that." "Fair enough," Director Voss agreed. "We'll arrive at Haven Outpost in approximately 6 hours. Until then, I suggest you rest and acclimate. Dr. Elias can answer any immediate questions you might have about the Lazarus Protocol or its integration with your biology." As Director Voss departed, Mara turned back to Dr. Elias, who was observing her with what appeared to be both scientific interest and personal warmth. "You said you worked with my ancestor," she began. "How many others from that time are still alive? How far did the original research actually progress?" Dr. Elias gestured for her to sit, taking a chair opposite her. "Those are complex questions, Mara. The truth is, Project Lazarus was never just about extending human lifespan. It was about creating time for humanity to solve the problems it had created for itself, time to outgrow its most destructive tendencies before those tendencies led to extinction." "And has that happened?" Mara asked. "In the century since the project began, has humanity changed for the better?" A shadow crossed the doctor's face. "Some things have improved. Others have worsened. The consortium has expanded its influence across 3 more sectors since your ancestors' time. Resources grow scarcer. Conflicts over those resources grow more intense. So we've failed, Mara concluded bleakly. No, Dr. Elias corrected firmly. We've persevered. The work continues. And now, with your arrival and the complete Lazarus data, we have the opportunity to implement your ancestors' full vision. Which was what, exactly? Dr. Elias smiled enigmatically. That, I think, is better explained by the Council as a whole. But I can tell you this. The Lazarus Protocol, as implemented in your cellular structure, is merely the first stage of what your ancestor designed. The true potential goes far beyond simple life extension. Mara wanted to press for more details, but exhaustion was overtaking her again, the after-effects of stasis and neural integration demanding rest. Dr. Elias noticed immediately, helping her back to the bed. Sleep, he suggested gently. Your mind and body need time to process all that's happened. When you wake, we'll be approaching Haven Outpost, and the next phase of your journey can begin. As Mara drifted back into sleep, Alara's voice followed her into dreams. Rest now, heir of Hrix. Soon, you will understand why your family protected this knowledge for so long, and why now is finally the time for its revelation. In her dreams, Mara stood on the bridge of the passage checks once more. But the ship was whole and vibrant, its systems humming with perfect harmony. Beside her stood a woman she recognized from family hollows, her great-great-grandmother, the original Alara Hrix. We've waited so long for you, Dream Alara said, her eyes reflecting the same determination Mara had seen in the AI's hologram. The journey is just beginning. Mara slept deeply, her cells rebuilding themselves according to patterns established a century before, preparing her for the challenges that lay ahead. When Mara next awoke, the Haven was approaching a massive asteroid that had been transformed into a self-contained habitat. Unlike the temporary facility where the passage checks had briefly hidden, this outpost was clearly designed for permanence, its surface dotted with observation domes, landing platforms, and what appeared to be agricultural sectors protected by transparent force fields. Haven Outpost, announced Dr. Elias, who had returned to escort her to the bridge. Home to just over 3,000 people, scientists, engineers, philosophers, and their families, all dedicated to the principles your ancestor established. Mara stared in wonder as they drew closer. You built all this in secret, without the consortium knowing? The consortium knows we exist, Dr. Elias clarified. They simply don't know what we do. Officially, Haven Outpost is a deep space research facility, studying asteroid mining techniques, valuable enough to justify our existence, but not significant enough to warrant close scrutiny. The Haven docked smoothly at one of the larger landing platforms, where a small delegation awaited their arrival. Director Voss led Mara and Dr. Elias through the ship's airlock and into the outpost proper, where the artificial gravity and atmospheric systems created an environment that felt remarkably Earth-like despite their location in deep space. The council is assembled in the central chamber, Director Voss informed them, as they walked through corridors that hummed with activity. They're eager to meet you, Mara. How many are on this council? Mara asked, noting the respectful nods directed at their small group as they passed outpost residents. 7, including myself and Dr. Elias, Director Voss replied. Each represents a different aspect of the project: science, ethics, security, implementation, resource management, historical continuity, and leadership. They entered a large circular room where 5 individuals sat at a round table, their diverse appearances suggesting origins from across the galaxy. Director Voss and Dr. Elias took their places among them, leaving a single empty chair clearly intended for Mara. Herr Hendris, Director Voss began formally. I present to you the Continuity Council of Haven Outpost. We have maintained the vision of Project Lazarus through the decades, awaiting the return of the Hrix bloodline and the complete data sequence. One by one, The council members introduced themselves, each, Mara realized with growing astonishment, a contemporary of her ancestor, who had used early versions of the Lazarus Protocol to extend their lives while continuing the work. "You're all over a century old," she murmured, taking her seat. "Living proof that the technology works. In its limited form." "Yes," acknowledged Counselor Tarek, the security specialist. "But what we've achieved is merely life extension, not the true potential of the protocol. For that, we needed the complete data sequence, which has now been integrated into your cellular structure." "And what exactly is this true potential?" Mara asked, looking around the table. Alara mentioned it was more than just extending human lifespan, but she hasn't shared the details. "Because they are your birthright to discover." Alara's voice whispered in her mind. "The final decision must be yours alone." Dr. Elias leaned forward, his expression serious. "The complete Lazarus Protocol doesn't simply extend life, Mara. When fully implemented, it creates what your ancestor termed temporal continuity, the ability to transfer consciousness and memory through time itself." Mara stared at him, struggling to comprehend. "You're talking about time travel?" "Not physically," Director Voss clarified. "But in every way that matters. The protocol allows neural patterns, memory, personality, knowledge, to be encoded in a way that transcends normal temporal limitations. In practical terms, it means consciousness can be transferred backward along an individual's own timeline, creating the opportunity to literally relive one's life with full awareness of future events." The implications struck Mara with the force of a physical blow. You could change things, make different choices, alter the course of history. "Within limits," cautioned Counselor Nevin, the ethics specialist. "The protocol only works within a single lifetime. You cannot transfer consciousness to a period before your birth. And while small changes are possible, major historical events tend to have a momentum that's difficult for any individual to redirect completely." "It's more about accumulation than revolution," Dr. Elias added. "Living multiple loops of the same life, gathering knowledge, making incremental improvements. Your ancestors' vision was for humanity to have guides, individuals who carried the wisdom of multiple lifetimes, helping to nudge civilization away from its most destructive paths." Mara sat back, mind reeling. "And you want me to be one of these guides? To use the complete protocol and... what? Start my life over again?" "That is one possibility," Director Voss acknowledged. "But the choice of how to implement the technology has always been reserved for the Hicks bloodline. Your ancestor was adamant that her descendants must decide the path forward, whether to use the protocol personally, to share it with others, or even to destroy it if they deemed humanity unready. Which is why the Consortium and the Watchers have hunted your family for generations," added Counselor Tarek grimly. "They want to control who receives this power, to ensure it serves their interests rather than humanity's collective future." Mara looked around the table, studying each face, these impossibly old individuals who had dedicated centuries to preserving a technology they couldn't fully use, honoring a promise made to her ancestor. "What would you do," she asked finally, "if the choice were yours?" The council members exchanged glances, and Mara sensed this was a question they had debated among themselves for decades. "I would implement it selectively," Dr. Elias said after a moment. "Choose individuals of exceptional wisdom and compassion, not leaders or those seeking power, but teachers, healers, philosophers. People who would use multiple lifetimes to deepen human understanding rather than control human destiny." "I would focus on preservation," said Counselor Lin, the resource management specialist. "Use the protocol to ensure critical knowledge isn't lost during civilization's inevitable downturns. A human backup system for our most important insights and discoveries." Each council member offered a different perspective, their suggestions reflecting their areas of expertise and personal values. When they finished, all eyes turned to Mara, waiting for her response. But she wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. The weight of such a choice was too enormous. The implications, too far-reaching. "I need time," she said finally, "to understand the technology fully, to consider all possibilities." "Of course," Director Voss agreed immediately. "We've waited generations for this moment. We can certainly wait a little longer for your decision." As the council meeting adjourned, Mara found herself drawn to one of the observation domes that looked out upon the star-filled void. Dr. Elias joined her there, standing in companionable silence for several minutes before speaking. "Your ancestor faced a similar moment of decision," he said quietly. "When she first realized what she had created, she spent weeks in isolation, considering the potential consequences. And she chose to hide it," Mara noted, "to scatter her family and bury the technology for over a century. Because the world wasn't ready," Dr. Elias confirmed. "The question you must answer is whether it's ready now." Mara pressed her palm against the transparent dome, feeling the cold of space just centimeters away. "The consortium is stronger than ever. The Watchers still hunt for power. Has anything really changed?" "Humanity has," Dr. Elias suggested. "Not uniformly, not completely, but meaningfully. There are more people now who understand that our challenges require collective solutions, not individual power grabs. More who recognize that wisdom must guide technology, not the other way around." In her mind, Alara's presence stirred. "He speaks truth. The time has come not to hide the protocol, but to implement it in a way that serves its true purpose, creating the time humanity needs to mature beyond its most destructive impulses." Mara turned from the viewport, a decision forming in her mind. Not the final choice, perhaps, but the beginning of one. "I want to see everything," she told Dr. Elias. "All the research, all the applications you've discovered, all the safeguards you've developed. Before I decide anything, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Dr. Elias smiled, relief evident in his expression. "Then let me show you what a century of preparation looks like. Herr Hendris, I think you'll find we've been busy while waiting for your arrival." Over the following days, Mara immersed herself in the work of Haven Outpost. She studied the applications of the limited Lazarus protocol that had allowed the council members to extend their lives. She examined the theoretical models for the complete protocol that her ancestor had encoded in her cellular structure. She discussed ethics and implementation with specialists who had dedicated their lives to considering the implications of temporal continuity. And gradually, a vision began to form, not exactly what her ancestor had intended, nor what the council had anticipated, but something uniquely her own. A path that honored the past while creating new possibilities for the future. When she finally called the council back into session, Mara stood before them, not as the uncertain mechanic who had awakened aboard the Haven, but as the true heir of Hryx, a woman who understood her legacy and was prepared to carry it forward. "I've made my decision," she announced, her voice steady and clear. "The Lazarus Protocol will not be used to create a single guide for humanity, nor will it be implemented widely enough to risk societal disruption. Instead, I propose a middle path, the formation of a renewal council." She activated the holographic display at the center of the table, showing her proposed implementation. "We will use the protocol to create a rotating body of wisdom keepers, individuals who complete one full lifetime before receiving the temporal continuity treatment. No shortcuts to power, no manipulation of events without the perspective that comes from living a complete human life." The council members studied her proposal with intense interest as she continued. Each member of the Renewal Council would bring the wisdom of their first lifetime to bear on the challenges of their second. They would serve not as rulers or controllers, but as advisors and teachers, helping humanity learn from its past without dictating its future. "And who would select these individuals?" asked Counselor Nevin. the ethics specialist. A diverse committee representing all sectors of human society, Mara replied, with criteria focused on wisdom, compassion, and demonstrated commitment to collective well-being rather than personal power. No one from the consortium leadership would be eligible, nor anyone who has actively sought political power. Implementation would be gradual, she continued, advancing the display to show a timeline, beginning with a small founding group and expanding slowly over decades. Each candidate would need to be approved by existing Renewal Council members, creating a self-regulating system that guards against corruption or power consolidation. And the technology itself, asked Director Voss. How would it be protected? By distribution rather than centralization, Mara explained. The complete protocol would be divided into components, with no single individual or group holding all the pieces. Implementation would require consensus among multiple stakeholders, preventing any faction from monopolizing the process. As Mara outlined the remaining details of her plan, she could sense the Council's growing approval, not because she had chosen exactly what any of them would have preferred, but because she had found a balance that honored her ancestors' vision while addressing the realities of their current situation. When she finished speaking, Director Voss rose from her seat. Herr Hendris has presented a thoughtful and balanced approach to implementing the Lazarus Protocol. As is our tradition, we will now vote on whether to support this path forward. One by one, the Council members registered their approval, until all 7 had given their consent to Mara's proposal. Then it is decided, Director Voss announced formally. Haven Outpost will dedicate its resources to implementing the Renewal Council initiative under Herr Hendris's direction. The waiting is over. The work begins. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Elias approached Mara, genuine admiration in his eyes. Your ancestor would be proud, he said quietly. You've found a way to honor her vision while making it your own. I had help, Mara replied, tapping her temple where Alara's presence resided. A bit of her wisdom to guide me. The best kind of legacy, Dr. Elias observed. Not dictating the future, but informing it. Not controlling descendants, but empowering them. Later, standing alone in the observation dome, Mara watched as technicians began preparations for the first Lazarus regeneration chamber to be installed at Haven Outpost. It would take years to fully implement her vision, to identify candidates, to establish the selection process, to create the safeguards necessary to prevent misuse of such powerful technology. But for the first time since discovering her family's legacy, Mara felt the weight of responsibility transforming into something lighter, not a burden to be carried alone, but a shared undertaking that would extend far beyond her own lifetime. This is just the beginning, Alara's voice reminded her. The cycle your ancestor began continues through you, but it doesn't end with you. Never complete, Mara murmured, repeating the Ricks family motto that had guided generations before her. Just beginning a new loop. Outside the viewport, stars blazed in the darkness, countless worlds filled with people who would never know her name or understand her role in shaping humanity's future. But they would benefit nonetheless from the wisdom of those who had lived multiple lifetimes, who carried the accumulated experience of humanity's triumphs and mistakes through time itself. The passage checks was gone, but its purpose had been fulfilled. The abandoned ship, guardian of secrets for 117 years, had completed its mission, delivering the Lazarus Protocol to the heir who would finally implement it as intended. Mara placed her hand against the transparent dome, feeling the cold of space against her palm. Thank you, she whispered to her ancestor, to Alara, to all those who had preserved the legacy until she could claim it. I won't let you down. And somewhere in the vast tapestry of time and space, she sensed a response, not in words, but in the profound certainty that she stood at the beginning of something momentous, a new cycle in humanity's long journey toward wisdom. The work had only just begun.